Om Tavagatamaratam Taptajivanam Kavivireditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadatam Bhuvigananti Purirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone. I have a confession and an apology to make. I started from the wrong page last time. We ha- we have two sets of bookmarks here because we also read every morning. Yeah, yeah, and I made a big point about it being 1884 and midway and everything, and we still haven't finished the chapter festival at Pānihāti. So we're going to go back to where I should have done it last week, and then when we get to the part that I already did, I'll just briefly go through that, and we'll continue from there. So now it's August 18th, 1883. It's a very, very short section, page 272. August 18th, 1883. I mentioned several times the festival at Pānihāti contains several dates that are not on the day of the festival. For some reason, when he compiled everything, he put everything in this one chapter, even though the festival was quite a bit earlier. Festival took place June 18th, 1883, and now we're all the way up to August 1883. Of course, this is the English version. It may be different in the Bengali. Sri Ramakrishna was at Balaram Bose's house in Calcutta. This was the house where Thakur went more than any other house. They say that he had 100 different visits there to Balaram Bose's house. So this was his main drawing room, you can say, in Kolkata. If you go there, of course, it's one of the centers of the order now. It's a wonderful place. There's a tremendous atmosphere there. So many of the direct disciples stayed there. Holy Mother stayed there. Swami Turiyananda, Swami Brahmananda was very nervous about staying at the Balaram during the malaria season. Very often he would stay there. Latu Maharaj stayed there, so many of them. And when Thakur was there, he would stay in the upstairs. There's an open courtyard inside. So there's an inside veranda, not an outside veranda. Inside veranda, you can look over and see the courtyard. And that's where the chariot festival, where they would draw the chariot at the time of Rath Yatra, there, which Thakur did, and that's still there. And the room where Thakur used to stay and where he would meet with the devotees is now the shrine room. So it's a wonderful place. So Sri Ramakrishna was at Balaram Bose's house in Calcutta. He was explaining the mystery of divine incarnation to the devotees. Master, in order to bring people spiritual knowledge, an incarnation of God lives in the world in the company of devotees, cherishing an attitude of love for God. Now, this is a little bit different from what we read in the Gita, where there's more emphasis on dharma. The reason for the avatar there is when there's too much of adharma. We're going the wrong direction, and there has to be a correction made. So in order to eliminate this tendency towards adharma, and very often it means killing people in a war. We have Mahabharata war. And then to bring back dharma, because there's ideas that we reach a high level and then slowly go down, and some degeneration takes place, and then there's a need for the for God to come in human form in order to push everything back up, and then it goes down, 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 down. We have the same idea with the four yugas, that the Satya Yuga, everything is good, and then gradually it gets worse and worse and worse. Then we have to have dissolution and start all over again. So on a small scale, that's what happens with the avatar. Now, the devotional schools, and Sri Ramakrishna also, they emphasize the fact that the avatar comes for presenting an ideal, a devotional ideal, spiritual ideal. Vitaritum avitirnam jnana bhakti prashanti. We have this line in the dhyana mantra of Sri Ramakrishna, one of my favorite lines there, that he descends and takes human form, jnana bhakti prashanti. Vitaritum, in order to spread it throughout the world. Vitaritu avitirnam, he takes human birth in order to spread. So not just devotion, so knowledge, devotion, and peace, prashanti, the highest type of peace. Anyhow, here Thakur is emphasizing this idea of cherishing an attitude of love for God. So this is more within the Vaishnava tradition of having a relationship with God, and a dualistic relationship, and assuming a particular spiritual attitude and one of the bhavas. So Thakur emphasizes this. In order to bring spiritual knowledge, an incarnation of God lives in the world in the company of devotees, cherishing an attitude of love for God. It is like going up and coming down the stairs after having once reached the roof. In order to reach the roof, other people should follow the path of devotion as long as they have not attained knowledge and become free of desire. Now, this is also very interesting. That there's so many times when Thakur talks about getting to the roof, and who can come back down from the roof, and how do we get there? And now he's saying that, see, generally we think getting to the roof means higher stages of meditation, and this nirvikalpa samadhi, that's getting to the roof and not being able to come back down again. But Thakur often talks about through the path of devotion. Now, through the path of devotion, if one gets to the roof, it may not be that same type of nirvikalpa samadhi that will be impossible to bring the mind back down from, but it can still confer liberation, and it can allow the devotee to go back and forth, to come back down. Not back and forth so easily like Thakur did, but at least to live in the world. So sometimes we think that Thakur is telling us that the ultimate goal of life is this God realization, and an ordinary person can't come back from that. It's not necessarily the case. Even the jnani doesn't necessarily have to have this nirvikalpa samadhi experience, although there are differences of opinions on that. But it seems when we read about the descriptions of the jnani, that is just a flash with eyes open, and nothing about. They may see the world kind of disappearing before their eyes, but still they're able to talk about it. And so we have this idea of enlightenment. Enlightenment, we're fully awakened. This is a Buddhist idea. They're fully awakened, and as opposed to merging into Brahman to such an extent that there's no coming back down from it. That's not the only model that we have for God realization. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is saying for those who don't do that, who don't follow the path of knowledge or this path of meditation, that they should follow this path of devotion. And for them, they can go up and come back down. It's very interesting how he puts it here. Let me read this again. It is like going up and coming down the stairs after having once reached the roof. In order to reach the roof, other people, so other people means those other than the avatar, and Ishvarakoti. Ishvarakoti is resembles the avatar to a certain extent, in that they're also nitya siddha, they're born perfect, they're not born out of karma. and they can come back from that state of samadhi, but they come along with the avatar. This is the idea that the companions. The avatar is like the huge planet or something, and then it'll have the moons that go around it that'll come along with it, something like that. So, but this is other people. So that means us. That means devotees. Yeah? Not that we can't follow the path of knowledge to a certain extent, but for those who do not have that intense renunciation and do not have the strong feeling that I'm not this body and mind, who look upon this world as kind of a passing dream, they're qualified for the path of knowledge. And for Thakur, that means pretty much only those who have not followed the householder path. He'll mention that here. In order to reach the roof, other people should follow the path of devotion as long as they have not attained knowledge and become free of desire. So the advantage of the devotee starts from the bottom of the ladder. Devotee only has to be sincere. There's no qualification. It's not like they have to go through a long study and they have to have be filled with renunciation and all of that. They just have to be sincere, longing for God realization or to lead a good life, to lead a good spiritual type of life. That's enough. A certain amount of course, it has to be leading a moral, ethical, pure type of life, but not restricted to just all renouncing monks. It's for everyone, open to everyone. No caste restriction, of course, no gender restriction, none of that. The roof can be reached only when all desires are done away with. So now he's talking about people who still have some desires. He says as long as they have not attained knowledge, become free from desire. So as we go higher and higher, the desire to reach the roof becomes stronger. The other desires start to melt away a little bit. So we don't have to be free from desires in the beginning because we're human beings. We have desires. Everybody has them. We're born with them. And Thakur doesn't. He's not so strict with this idea of desires. They're harmless desires. But those that are really preventing us from having some type of a higher type of longing for God, those we have to gradually learn to control. But Thakur's way is increase the good desire for God. We constantly fight against these lower desires, and the mind is dwelling on them. It's a little bit self-defeating. So he says, focus on the positive things. The shopkeeper does not go to bed before finishing his accounts. He goes to sleep only when his accounts are finished. So we still have some desires left. That means that it's not adding up right. That we have before we can really go to sleep at night. That means reach the roof. We can't do that when we still have a balance of desires. But the closer that we get, and even if we think about, say, Holy Mother, Thakur also Holy Mother, they emphasize this idea that if we don't realize God now, that we'll have that realization at the time of death. That Thakur will come at the time of death. And we think that unless we get rid of all of our desires now, how can we get rid of them at the time of death? What do you think? Anybody?
You can.
How?
Praise. Mental detachment for
No, because we know that, we've seen all that, being through so much of agony, suffering, we know there's nothing in it.
Yeah, really, when we know that death is around the corner, when we get to the end, these desires won't be there anymore. Thakur says that, it's the day that you find out that a friend of yours died or something like that, will you care for, having a good meal and this and things like that? So when we get close to the end, automatically the mind will get drawn in. If we've been leading a spiritual life, if we've been trying, making some effort. So at that very final moment, where will there be the there's a desire for worldly enjoyment when we know that death is right there waiting for us. So we can understand that there's a big difference between final liberation and God realization here and now. This is what Mother says, that you want God realization here and now, you have to work very, very hard. Otherwise, lead a good spiritual life, practice devotion, surrender, reliance on God, all of this, and at the very end, the fruits will come, and that there won't be room for desire for worldly things at that stage. So we can be hopeful. That will be our case. To M, a man will certainly succeed if he will take the plunge. Success is sure for such a man. So Thakur is not telling us. He's not telling us that, oh, don't worry so much. Don't work so hard now. You'll get liberation at the end. He's not saying that. He's emphasizing that we have to really try now. But if, through all of our effort, if we don't get that, which is very, very rare, some vision of God or some samadhi, some ecstasy, if we don't get that it's not hopeless. That at the very end.
What's the point getting then?
The
We should
point-
get the bliss now, enjoy, have that bliss.
Yeah, that's why we're trying to do it now. Otherwise, it simply becomes like other religions that lead a good life, die, then go to heaven. Yeah.
Okay.
No, we have to feel there's a burden of Maya now. We have to feel there's a burden that Swamiji has a very nice quote that we're calling things by wrong names, that we're in the state of ignorance, the state of bondage, that there's no real freedom. We're bound by our passions, our desires. We have to feel we want to shake it off. It has to be very strong. But at the same time, especially, he'll talk about householders, especially the family life, there's a career, all of that has to be looked into. We can't just give those things up. Maybe at the very final stage of life, we'll read with advice to Ishan. Ishan was quite elderly at the time. Thakur says, or Vidyasagar. He said, look, all the work that he's done is wonderful, but time has come to give it up. Spend your time. He didn't realize the gold lying hidden within his heart. So even in the householder life is not throughout the life. Householder life is only the second stage of life. Then there's a retired stage, and then at the end, of course, not many people actually do that, but to really take sannyasa at the end of life. So, yeah.
The householders should also stop working for the detachment unless they stop doing that mentally. How do they reach that?
Yeah, this householder stage of life. Common artha. We have 4 stages of life, and we have 4 aims of life. The common artha, or the 2 that are connected with the garhastya stage of life, for the grihastha, for the householder. One way is by fulfilling desires. So in the beginning of married life, that's not the time to start saying, I don't want this, I don't want that. That's the time we have some legitimate, everything guided by dharma. Dharma, aviruddha. It has to be adharma, aviruddha. It can't be in conflict with dharma. So we fulfill those desires and see through them. We say either, okay, that was good. I enjoyed that. Now I'm content. I don't have to do that again. Or we say, no, I thought it would be a wonderful thing. It's not such a wonderful thing. So we experiment. This is that time of life, the householder stage of life, to do that. So that by the end, that either these desires will have fallen off. We realize they're not such a big deal. It wasn't so wonderful that it gets entangled in the world. Or we say, yes, I'm glad that I did it. It was a good experience for me, and I don't need to do it again. I'm finished with it. So, because it's long range, householder between, say, the first beginning, the householder stage of life, and getting to the point ready to retire. That means that career is done, that whatever had to be done from the career point of view. Somebody can say, yes, I build up a good business. I'm ready to turn it over to the children. I have some satisfaction came from that now I know they're provided for. I don't have to worry about them. And that's not the feeling that one gets at the beginning of the married life. That comes at the end. Huh? So there's a big gradation. By the time we reach that end, it should be that bhoganta. We've reached the end of enjoyment. We hear this term all of the time. It's very, very important. That it doesn't mean, if we simply say, I won't allow myself to fulfill any of these desires. Rasavarjam, the longing for it stays. Huh? This is the chapter 2 of Gita. Is a very important point. Just denying ourselves things, sometimes the desire gets greater, increases. So some things we fulfill and we observe. How wonderful was it? Was it worth the price? Huh? And then we can get rid of those things. So one by one, we do that during the householder stage of life. So we learn our lessons, and so that at some point we learn that moderation is a more satisfying type of life, a simple life, not throwing things off. At this point, moderation. Huh? Then we reach a point where at the end, the body will be thrown off any day. Why be connected with anything? Then we reach the higher stages, the vanaprastha stage or the sannyasa stage. But for Thakur, this going slow isn't enough. See, the householder devotees that he had were also equally special. They weren't ordinary. We look at this in Balaram and M and even Girish, Nagmahasi, there were so many of them that they were of very high caliber. And so even M, Thakur thought that here is a person perfectly qualified to be a sannyasi even. That's why he wasn't very happy when he heard he was married with children in the beginning. So he wanted us to dive deep into our spiritual practice, but at the same time, fulfill our duties in the world. That he didn't like it when some of the householders, there are one or two exceptions, when they would want to renounce everything. He said, what do you mean? You'll let other people feed your family? You got married and had children, and now you want to let somebody else take care of them. You have duties and responsibilities, he would tell them. So at the same time, both of these, this is our karma yoga. We fulfill all of our duties and responsibilities. At the same time, we call on God with great sincerity. We have to dive deep. So take the plunge, he's saying. Success is sure. So either during this lifetime or at the end. Success is sure. Well, what do you think of the worship conducted by Keshav, Shivanath, and other Brahmo leaders? M. They are satisfied, as you say, with describing the garden, but they seldom speak of seeing the master of the garden. Describing the garden is the beginning and the end of their worship. Thakur's relationship with Keshav and Shivanath and the other Brahmo leaders, first of all, it wasn't the same. His relationship with Keshav was quite different from his relationship with the others. He and Keshav had a very, very loving, close, intimate, and respectful relationship. That Keshav really almost looked upon him as a guru, even though they didn't accept his guru idea, and but had that type of reverence and respect for him. And Thakur just enjoyed his company, and really thought. He said, for someone to get so much respect and everything, they have to have some spiritual power to them. So his relationship with him was different from all of the others. Now, Vijaya Krishna Goswami, Thakur's relationship with him was also different because he saw that here is someone fit for, first of all, his bhakti path, his path of devotion, and second of all, the path of renunciation. See, bhakti and renunciation can go together also. It's not, we connect the path of jnana yoga and sannyasa, and the householder life with the bhakti yoga. But it can be the other way also. He was a great devotee of God, and yet had that burning renunciation, longing for God realization. Look at Chaitanya Deva. He is the highest example of bhakti yoga and sannyasa. He was such a strict sannyasi, that we can hardly imagine how he would even banish them from the community. This younger Haridas, that taking picture from the elderly widow when he was told not to mix with women, and so he was so strict that way. So this is really our misconception sometimes, if we think that if we're householders, we have to follow the path of devotion, and jnanis, but jnani and sannyasa go together, of course. There are householder jnanis. Thakur talks about them, but not in very glowing terms, with always with a little footnote. It's difficult for them to really do it. But the path of devotion and the path of renunciation can, of course, very easily go together. So M replies, they are satisfied, as you say, with describing the garden, but they seldom speak of seeing the master of the garden. Describing the garden as the beginning and end of their worship. Thakur would sometimes ask them, first of all, he would go to their service. He would go to Calcutta on various times when they had these annual, semi-annual meetings and things. And so he heard them speak many times. And even in different homes, they would have these festivals. And very often, especially Vijay, he would say, "Oh, you're here. Let us just listen." He would say, "No. Follow your regular routine and schedule. Let me hear what you have to say." And one time, at least, at Dakshineshwar, he said to Keshav, "I want to hear you give a lecture." So he spoke. And Thakur always said the same thing. "Yeah, but Keshav, why do you talk so much about, oh, how wonderful is this universe you've created and everything?" So the same thing. So and it caught the right point here. Of course, he had heard Thakur say that. They are satisfied, as you say, with describing the garden, but they seldom speak of seeing the master of the garden. Describing the garden as the beginning and end of their worship. Master, you are right. Our only duty is to seek the master of the garden and speak to him. The only purpose of life is to realize God. Now, we're talking about going to the roof and coming back down. Well, we've had so many discussions about this Vijnani state, about seeing everything as a manifestation of God. The other side of it, that Thakur says, especially for the devotee, is that one sees God, one talks to God in that state. We don't know exactly. This goes beyond our ability to just logically conceive of these things. But this was Thakur's experience, of course. Sri Ramakrishna then went to Adhar's house. Now we've met Adhar several times, and we've seen how quickly he became devoted to Sri Ramakrishna. That now this will be second or third time maybe going to his home, and we know that he'll die shortly after this. He had an accident falling off of a horse and died. But he was very fortunate, for just a year maybe, that Thakur loved him so much, went to his home many times. He would go there very often, and from work he would go and spend time there, and so he became very devoted to Sri Ramakrishna. See, there are two. There's this Ishan and Adhar. When we go through the gospel, we think that Thakur, he doesn't have such a high opinion because he scolds them both a lot, but because he loved them so much. And then he knew there's Adhar, that his days are numbered, and he's worried so much about getting a promotion, a better job, and everything. So because he loved him so much, and the same thing with the Ishan, he was such a good, generous person that he wanted him to say, "Okay, stop. You've given enough. You've done enough of this arbitration and the charitable works and everything, because he also was coming to the end of his life. So Sri Ramakrishna then went to Adhar's house. After dusk, he sang and danced in Adhar's drawing room. M. Rakal and other devotees were present. After the music, he sat down, still in an ecstatic mood. He said to Rakal, "This religious fervor is not like the rain in the rainy season, which comes in torrents and goes in torrents." There's a footnote that means referring to himself. That means when Thakur, when it says that he danced, this is spontaneous. That he'll get into some ecstatic mood and just without thinking, he'll just get up and be singing and dancing and everything, just filled with ecstasy. So this rain in the rainy season, that you'll get a big flood and that it'll be gone. So it's not like that. This was a steady flow with him. It is like an image of Shiva that has not been set up by human hands, but is a natural one that had sprung up, as it were, from the bowels of the earth. There are two different types of Shiva lingams. The ones that are some polished stone, or can be different types of materials and things, and then some are just some big rock that you don't even see the bottom of it. So, say Kedarnath is like that, and so that's considered natural, and we don't see where it was formed, and nobody put it there. So, the Thakur says it sprung up, as it were, from the bowels of the earth. It seems to be like that. The other day you left Dakshineshwar in a temper. This is Rakal. I prayed to the Divine Mother to forgive you. We've seen before Thakur talking about this, that he half purposely got him angry. He said, unless what is it called? Yeah, it comes to a head. A boil comes to a head. You can't relieve the pressure from it and everything. So he said there's a reason behind it. I prayed to the Divine Mother to forgive you. The master was still in an abstracted mood and said to Adhar, "My son, meditate on the deity whose name you chanted." Now, we read, I think, earlier, the Thakur gave him initiation, wrote something on his tongue. So these were not ordinary people. Anyone who received initiation from Sri Ramakrishna, be initiated by an avatar. You can't be an ordinary person. Oh, here it is. With these words, he touched Adhar's tongue with his finger and wrote something on it. Okay. Did the master thereby impart spirituality to Adhar? These are rhetorical questions. M knows very well that he did, but he's just stating it this way. This was the way Thakur did it. This was his main method of giving initiation. That we don't know exactly. The one instance that I know of, that is Swami Abhedananda, where he says that Thakur wrote something on his tongue and uttered it also. Otherwise, we don't even know if they knew what he wrote or what it was. Probably is a Bij mantra or something. I don't know. These are all mysterious, and I always found it very odd that even you ask our seniors, swamis and everything, they also don't know. You would think that somehow this would be the secret lore. Someone would know the answers to these questions, but it was a little mysterious. It was directly imparting the Shakti, but how they practiced. Now he's telling him, meditate on the deity whose name you chanted. Now we don't hear about other chanting anything here. Maybe during the singing, during the music or something. And then touched his tongue with his finger and wrote something on it. There's another odd thing, how devotees would allow that. It's very, to let somebody touch your tongue. This is, you can't even let somebody touch something that your tongue has touched. If you eat something, uchishta. They say, "Eto, oidai." But to let them touch, and they would also be in some mood, and he would say, "Stick out your tongue," and he would write something on it. They would accept it. Huh? Did he do it with Swamiji? Huh? He touched him on the chest. We don't read about him writing anything on the tongue. We don't know. And Thakur gave so many instructions on meditation. My feeling is that he kept giving them different things. He'll say, now, this morning you meditate on this and you repeat this and everything. They were different, the direct disciples. They didn't have to have the same thing, the way we understand the initiation and meditation and mantra and all of that.
Swami,
Yeah.
if Thakur give same kind of mantra to everyone or depends on the person, it really did he?
This is what I'm saying. He didn't. We don't even know if he didn't give mantra that way. He didn't whisper it in the ear. He would write something on the tongue. This is all that we know. We read that he gave Swamiji this Rama mantra in Kashipur, but we don't take that really as his initiation and his Ishta Devata. That day he started running around there. He got so excited and everything. He had some ecstatic, experience through that. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know what they did as their spiritual practice. Swami Ashokanandaji, he simply had this vision of Swamiji, and he felt that he was initiated in everything. And we don't hear anything about receiving mantra in that dream or that experience. And yet, I've heard from other people that he would use his mala. So he would repeat something. So, yeah, because in our tradition, these are very private things. Nobody talks about them. This initiation experience, what one receives at the time of initiation. Now it's more standardized, but in those days, it could be different from one person to the other. Holy Mother used to give lots of different mantras. So Thakur knew all of them because he trained her. That was part of his training to Holy Mother towards the end of his life, when he told her, "You'll have to now take over for me." And he explained which type of people could take which type of mantra. And she would ask, "What is your family tradition?" And they give mantra according to that. Then at some point started giving Thakur's name. I don't know when and how, and if that was an option from the beginning. We don't. A lot of these things we don't know. Yeah.
If before the initiation, if somebody expresses his or her interest about one particular
Yeah, they would. Holy Mother would ask, and sometimes she would say, "Yes, my child," and other times she would say, "No, that's not for you." And sometimes they would have a dream, and she would say, "Repeat what you got in the dream," and she would say, "Yes." Other times she would say, "No, change it a little bit this way or that," something like that. So it depended. So there's no one standard thing.
He gave mantra to
Mother received mantra from the Swami Purnananda. That was the first time that she and Lakshmi Devi, it come from, I think, Chittagong, somewhere in the East Bengal, and so some Shakta tradition, and she received mantra from him. The unusual thing. Did Thakur himself initiate the Holy Mother? She was the Divine Mother of the universe to him. We don't know. He certainly, at the time of Shodashi Puja, he certainly awakened that divinity. We don't want to say he transferred his Shakti to her, because she's a Shakti herself. So somehow he awakened that divinity within her. But I don't remember reading anything about any initiation. Satuvai, you remember anything? Don't know the details. Yeah, of course, we consider her his disciple that way. But I don't know that there was any time that or typical type of initiation with mantra. But he gave her all these different mantras to do. Yeah, why she had that other initiation with that other Swami Purnananda, I don't know exactly.
That was before she came to Dakshineshwar.
No, it would have been afterwards. Before that, she was a young girl, just in her village. Yeah. They claim his ashram is still there in Chittagong, or near, out just outside of Chittagong. I never followed up on it. I think our Shiv Shankar or maybe Pradeep knows about it. Okay, this is a new chapter. Oh, did I start already? No. The Master in M, August 19th, 1883. It was Sunday, the first day after the full moon. Sri Ramakrishna was resting after his noon meal. The midday offering had been made in the temples, and the temple doors were closed. Yeah, this is standard. Of course, here everybody watches the food offering. Yeah, there either a curtain was drawn or people left at the time of the food offering. In the early afternoon, the master sat up on the small couch in his room and prostrated himself before him and sat on the floor. The master was talking to him on the philosophy of Vedanta. What does that mean, philosophy of Vedanta? Advaita Vedanta. Yeah. This is just the terminology. I mentioned that before, that Thakur either is a Purana or Vedanta. When he wanted to talk about dualistic devotional, it was according to the Puranas. It's just the terminology he used. If he wanted to talk about this path of knowledge and Advaita Vedanta, he would say according to Vedanta. Master to M. Self-knowledge is discussed in the Ashtavakra Samhita. Now, there's so many different little texts, Viveka Chudamani and other things like that. This is the one that Thakur knew best. And he even had a copy in his room. We know that. He asked Swamiji to read from it and everything. And a lot of his illustrations are from this. That idea of the dried leaf being blown in the wind. Huh? From one of the verses there. This idea that if you think that you're free, you'll become free. If you think you're bound, you remain bound. This is from Ashtavakra. So he liked it very much, that book. The non-dualists say, Soham, that is, I am the Supreme Self. This is the view of the sannyasis of the Vedantic school. So now we're getting that. This Advaita Vedanta and sannyasa, that these two things will go together. It's not that the householders can't follow this teaching, but Thakur and Shankaracharya himself really emphasized that if we don't have this strong feeling of renunciation, that this is not the proper path. That when I said that all we need to be is sincere, is to follow the path of devotion, is not enough in the path of knowledge. We have to have this tremendous vairagya that has to be very strong. This feeling of dispassion for the world. So this is the view of the sannyasis of the Vedantic school, but this is not the right attitude for householders. It's very rare when Thakur will be so strong about things. Usually he'll say, oh, everyone has different taste according to their temperament and taste and everything. But there's a general statement that he sticks to, and really this is the main teaching of our Bhakti Yoga in the Gita, chapter 12. The path of knowledge is okay, but it's much more difficult. Ati katara klesha. It's much more difficult to follow that path. We combine them. We don't discard the path of knowledge. We accept this idea of oneness. But this is why I like that expression, Advaita Vadans, but Dvaita Karans. So this is the view of the sannyasis of the Vedantic school, but this is not the right attitude for householders who are conscious of doing everything themselves. So the sense of I, this is one of the markers. As long as we feel that this identification with this lower ego sense, then if we say I am he, we're identifying the mind and the body complex and everything with the Brahman. It doesn't make sense. We have to have some feeling that this real I is Brahman itself, and to disidentify with the lower self. So that's has to be there at the beginning. Path of devotion, we go step by step by step. The path of knowledge, we begin with the final truth. The distinction. We begin by saying that I am one with Brahman. I'm not body, mind, senses, everything. The devotee can start out thinking, yes, I'm separate and God is separate. But I want to realize God. I want to reach God. I want to love God. Gradually, everything is provisional. Each step, but then we leave the one behind. Next one, leave the one behind. The path of knowledge, we have to start at the roof. We're sitting down there. We have to say, it's not like the lower bird who can gradually hop, go higher, higher, and higher, and higher. The lower bird has to say, I am that upper bird, from the very beginning. Very difficult. But this is not the right attitude for householders who are conscious of doing everything themselves. That being so, how can they declare, I am that, the actionless supreme self? If I say I'm the actionless supreme self, then I have to say I'm actionless. I don't do anything. Na kinchit karomi. This is, we read in Gita. But how can we say that when we feel that we're doing everything? It'll be hypocrisy, right? We pretend. According to the non-dualist, the self is unattached. Good. Now, Thakur, according to the non-dualist, self is unattached. Thakur accepts this as absolutely true. He'll talk about all of these things. It's one thing to accept something is true, another thing to accept it as the proper path to follow. Because these final truths, sometimes we have to go stage by stage to reach them. According to the non-dualist, the self is unattached. Good and bad, virtue and vice, and the other pairs of opposites cannot in any way injure the self, though they undoubtedly afflict those who have identified themselves with their bodies, not just with their bodies, body, mind, personality. So if you strike me, will it hurt me? It's a loaded question. If I take that me to this be the body, mind, senses, then of course it hurts me. If I say I am the witness, no, then you've hurt the body, and the mind experiences it, but not you haven't done anything to me. Yeah. But who can say that? Otherwise, it's a big talk. Yeah. Smoke soils the wall, certainly, but it cannot in any way affect akasha, space. Following the Vedantists of this class, Krishna Kishore used to say, I am ka, meaning akasha. Being a great devotee, he could say that with some justification, but it is not becoming for others to do so. You remember what happened to Krishna Kishore? The taxwala came one day, and he took away all his pots and pans. And Thakur saw me. He said, oh, look what happened. They took my pots and pans. I couldn't pay my taxes. And Thakur laughed. Look at you. You're always saying, I am ka. I am ka. So now you're worried about your pots and pans. Even then, Thakur said that he could do it with some justification, he says. Obviously not fully could do it. But to feel that one is a free soul is very good. Okay, now, I can feel that, yes, I'm an individual. I don't have to say I'm one with the Brahman. I can feel I'm an individual, but I can know that the real nature of the self is that I'm really not bound. I'm bound only when I identify with the mind. The mind is bound by its passion, the samskaras and everything, but I can feel that I'm free, just as the servant of God is free. That Hanuman could feel that freedom that comes from being a servant of God. There's a freedom that comes from that. To have that relationship, to fully depend on the Divine Mother. I'm free from worry, free from anxiety. Whatever happens, happens. I don't have to worry about anything like that. It's not the same as saying, yes, I'm one with the infinite absolute reality. But still, we should understand that This bondage belongs to the mind. This is why he liked that verse. This is from Ashtavakra Samhita. But to feel that one is a free soul is very good. By constantly repeating, I am free, a man verily becomes free. On the other hand, by constantly repeating, I am bound, he certainly becomes bound to worldliness through this false identification and desires and everything. The fool who says only, I am a sinner, verily drowns himself in worldliness. One should rather say, I've chanted the name of God. How can I be a sinner? How can I be bound? See, Swamiji, we think Swamiji was so bold and everything. He got everything from Thakur. Yeah, how Swamiji emphasized this idea that never call yourself. The worst possible sin is to call yourself a sinner. That we have to have that strength in it. He got that from Thakur. Now, well, this would be a very interesting thing that we get. See, Thakur is talking about the very highest ideal and everything. To him, you say, I am very much depressed today. What does that mean for Thakur to be depressed? Can he get depressed? Huh? Kumar, can Thakur get depressed? Yeah, of course. He can feel a little sadness. He has a mind. He has a human mind. If Rama could weep for Sita, he's allowed to get a little depressed sometimes. Huh? Not for himself. No, this will be because of Hriday. Not for himself. Otherwise, he's a blissful child of the Divine Mother. But he feels bad for Hriday. You see, I'm very much depressed today. Hriday has written to me that he is very ill. Why should I feel dejected about it? Is it because of Maya or Daya? Okay, now, Thakur makes a big point about this, that this Maya is based on this false identification with ourselves, with our near and dear ones, our loved ones, family members, and everything, that we have tremendous love and compassion for them, but because of this attachment, and it blocks out our ability to love and identify with people outside of our circle. So he says that this Maya is a harmful thing, but we don't cast it aside, we expand it. So then it becomes real Daya, real compassion, love for everyone. So the same love that we feel for our own family members and friends and everything, we try to feel for everyone. Then it becomes, so he's asking, is this Maya? That means it's only because he's my nephew that I feel like this. And so he'll answer. M doesn't know what to say, of course. Thakur asks these questions to M that are impossible to answer. M could not find suitable words for a reply and remained silent. It was a good technique to use, huh? Master, do you know what Maya is? So now he'll go through this whole thing. It is attachment to relatives, parents, brother and sister, wife and children, nephew and niece. Daya means love for all created beings. Now, what is this? My feeling about Hriday, is it Maya or Daya? But Hriday did so much for me. He served me wholeheartedly and nursed me when I was ill. Because in the early days, there was nobody else. And we see he was constantly by his side. We see the famous picture of him in Samadhi with the Brahmos and Hriday holding him up and everything. So he did so much service to him. Can you imagine what type of service he had to do? Thakur was completely unable to look after himself during his period of divine madness, to bathe him and clean him and help feed him and everything. He did so much for him. He really did. And then it went to his head. And he thought he could control him, and it just spun out of control. And ultimately, Thakur felt the Divine Mother had to make him leave that place. So this Mathur Babu's son, Trailokyaнаth, had a small daughter, and he took it into his head to worship her as a Kumari. And for a Brahmin to worship a lower caste girl was considered something very inauspicious. And they got furious, and they asked him to leave. That was a time when Thakur was also asked to leave, maybe by mistake, and he threw his gamcha over his shoulder and started walking away, and they ran him. Mathur found out. He said, no, you make sure he comes back. And he came back. Didn't mean anything to him. But Thakur felt that was really the Divine Mother saying that, no, it's really time for him to leave. No, he couldn't serve. And he suffered very much afterwards. A very sad type of life with poverty and selling goods on the street, became a kind of hawker towards the end.
But he was so mean to Holy Mother. Yes.
Terrible to Holy Mother.
Yeah, why?
And we wonder, why did Thakur allow him to insult Holy Mother, have her go back and everything? And now we can understand how afraid Thakur was of him, how he tormented him to such a point. You'll see that he wanted to kill himself. Otherwise, how could Thakur allow that? We wonder about that. But it just shows this how this relationship became so terrible, and how the Hriday, he was big and strong also, and not very bright, and not very much, not very spiritual. Didn't have a very subtle type of intellect or anything. But Hriday did so much for me. He served me wholeheartedly and nursed me when I was ill. But later, he tormented me also. The torment became so unbearable that once I was about to commit suicide by jumping into the Ganges from the top of the embankment. See, this is the one who is practically weeping for her. But he did much to serve me. Now my mind will be at rest if he gets some money. But whom shall I ask for it? Who likes to speak about such things to our rich visitors? Of course, he's saying this out loud so that people will find out. One of the most touching scenes in the entire gospel is when Hriday comes and he's waiting for him, and Thakur goes to see him. It's a little bit dark out, and M follows a little bit at a distance, and he falls at his feet and says how much he's suffering. And he says, why? Because I've lost your company. And then how is the crop? Not very good this year. And a very short visit. And he says, come back sometime. People are waiting for me. Very touching scene. Very sad scene. This Lila of the Avatar has so many different aspects and elements to it that are very difficult to understand. Thakur would say all of these things just thicken the plot. They bring some extra interest to this divine play. Don't know why it happens that way.
But was it Hriday who created the scene when Bhairavi Brahmani in the end last time when she went to Kamarpukur and there was a big scene created because was it Hriday?
I don't remember. Yeah. He was very jealous. He was very jealous of her, and the Brahmani was very jealous of Holy Mother. That also was a case where such a beautiful relationship is soured at the end.
Yeah.
But she realized it also, and then she went off to Benares, I think. Yeah, that Hriday wasn't completely wrong there. That she really became too possessive of Thakur and wanted to rule him a little bit. At 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Adar Sen and Balaram arrived. See, Adar keeps coming. Where are they? Oh, they're in Thakur at Dakshineshwar. After saluting Sri Ramakrishna, they sat on the floor and asked him if he was well. The master said, yes, I am well physically, but a little troubled in mind. He did not refer to Hriday and his troubles. So really, he only let M know, and we don't know who else was there at the time, huh? And he knew that M wasn't a wealthy person, even though M was very, very generous and did things very secretly. Secretly, he gave money. He gave money to Holy Mother. After Thakur passed away, he gave money to Swamiji's mother. And there's one letter that I think he says that how Swamiji would have been furious if he found out and everything. So he did these things without telling anybody. And of course, Balaram, he was one of the ones who gave money, even though really he didn't earn a lot of money. Okay, we can stop here. This is a good place. Now we'll get to his visit to Singhavahini. Okay, page 275. Don't let me forget. Start it. Right page next time. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukamбhātu Vigrahamai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Happy Diwali, Kali Puja to everybody. Okay, thank you.